All right, welcome back. We recently embarked on a journey with the blind drawing exercise, and today I want to sum up what I learned and go through all the drawings. While we take a look back on each episode, I'll go through what I think the main benefits to doing this are. So after we go through all the results and review them, I will tell you my thoughts and opinions on what I think about blind drawing. And there's also something secret at the end that I think is really, it's almost like a hack, so stay for that. Now with the blind drawing series, I set this mini-series up so I could cover a broad range of subjects, and the first episode we saw was the human figures. So let's take a look at the results of that initial round. I think we started out quite strong on the first drawing. There are some really strong contours and confident lines. While it's not anatomically correct, there are places where the forms are better defined, I think, here. And it gives us a place to rest our eyes on, even the feet. The legs, the feet, the hands, they're recognisable for what they are, even if they got over-exaggerated. And here you can see one leg almost in proportion, and also this side of the other leg, but the other outer edge of that leg has been blown way out of proportion. I did go over a few areas more than once because I found it quite easy to lose track of the part of the figure that I was drawing. But the additional contours did seem to give it a bit more visual interest, where it feels like the story and the path wanders a little bit and perhaps giving the viewer a bit more to figure out. And I think the head is quite abstract, more abstract than the rest of the figure, and mostly because of the facial features. I think that all the details in the face were pretty easy to lose track of. And I found as my focus shifts in and out, the drawings shift as well. Now this one was a real surprise for me. I went over the head twice because I enjoyed the results from the last drawing. This time the effect was wildly different. It makes it look like a person with two heads, but if you look closely and try to work it out, because it took me a little while to work it out and to see it at the time, these two heads share one face. So if you look closely, each head has one eye. The eyes, there's only one face, but the eyes span across both of the heads, and it took me a little time to see that. It was an incredible discovery for me, and I found it a really enjoyable find and really rewarding. The rest of the forms on this figure are very abstract, but we can still tell what it is. But even so, there are still some areas that look more cohesive, like the feet. Even the chest and the direction it faces is visible, but that's all still visible. Next we have this one. I remember thinking it was kind of groovy. A big head and the eyes were quite large. This figure captured from above, so there is quite a bit of foreshortening and perspective going on, and I think I conveyed that quite well. The arm and the hands look really good to me, especially this one. I was surprised at how well the fingers and that whole arm really came out. I think with these lines and these contours, it does convey movement and it feels dynamic, almost like she's dancing. Even with the parts that are exaggerated, I think that the feet really work to bring it all together, I think. Overall, I think it's an interesting shape, and there are many places we can rest our focus on, like the hands, through the body. It has quite a flow to it, from the hand to the hip, to the feet, and then back up. It's like she's dancing. Next we have this upside down figure. I thought being upside down it would give me an extra challenge, and it did. At the time I thought this was messy though. I didn't like it too much. I didn't find the overall shape interesting. I remember wishing that it had more of a waist in here to isolate this leg and this foot. That would have been perfect. But looking at it now, I think it does have some visual interest. There is still a story here that I can explore. It just takes a bit longer to pick out the pieces apart from each other. Then we have Dog Week. I really enjoyed the dog episode. I love drawing animals, and I think the results reflected that, so let's take a look. The first dog, I remembered being really surprised at how much I actually enjoyed and loved the results. It felt so expressive and abstract. And this dog was telling me about his journey onto the page. I was surprised by the chain as well. I really didn't think that it would look so chain-like as it did, because when we do these drawings blind, things like this can become extremely disconnected. This dog is more than the reference, I think. This drawing has its own unique thumbprint, which I love, and its own life on the paper, and I actually find these paws really cute. Well, the whole thing is cute to me. Like I said, I really enjoyed Dog Week. And next we have our cattle dog on the rock. At the time, nothing really stood out to me for this one. I remember just going to the next one, which was a shame, because looking at it now, I think it looks quite strong as it's looking down on us. it gives a strong impression, even if it's not accurate. So sometimes the image itself doesn't speak to us straight away, but given enough attention, the feeling it gives us will. To me, this feels like a strong, majestic dog looking down, purveying his area. I remember absolutely loving these next two dogs. The shapes and the long lines connecting us all the way through to the paws. And then we have some details on the head that we can focus on until we're ready for the sweeping paths down the body and the legs, down to the legs. The paws aren't accurate, but they work in this context. I think they actually work. A lovely shape overall, I think. I find this more interesting than perfectly rendered pictures of dogs because there is a little bit more for the brain to figure out. It gives me something more enjoyable to do, as long as it's not too hard to put those pieces together. And so far we haven't strayed too far from that path. I can still recognise what we're looking at, so it works. And then the next one, I love this dog as well. They're really just a style of their own when you see them side by side. Each one is unique. You don't quite know exactly what you're going to get out of each one until you actually draw it. And then you get to discover it the second time, for the first time and the second time, if that makes sense. It really lends itself to pushing you in directions that you might not explore otherwise as well. And I chose this dog for the silhouette, the movement, and the opposition of the direction of the head going this way and the body going this way. And I tried to use more long connecting lines and lean into that idea, not knowing if it would work. And I also put a little bit more time and detail into the head and the ears as a result. I think that those ears came out quite strong. The extra lines around the ears, I think, add to the drawing, giving that area just a little bit more emphasis. And I find sometimes drawing blind can be a mixing pot of lines and parts, and we pick the ones we see first out to reveal the initial impression, but the longer we look, the more we can add to that mix to discover. The only part I didn't like about this was this line here. I felt that it was sticking out, but the rest of it is so strong that I wouldn't notice that. I didn't notice that until the very end. So that was the dog episode. And next we have horses. So this was part 3, I believe. I might be wrong. And these were all fun. This was fun. And because of the way of the long fluid lines from the last episode, I tried to bring that across to Horse Week. And it didn't quite happen that way, but Horse Week had its own surprises. And I remember after drawing this, the first one, I had a moment where I couldn't tell if the horse was facing away, coming towards me. The head looks like it's facing away, but the body looks like it's coming towards me. It was just a moment of an optical illusion, which was really captivating at the time. The horse in the reference is facing away, by the way. And the head looks unexpectedly skeletal. I found with a nose, it looks like this is the nose bone and this is the jawbone. Obviously, it's not. It's just a little bit discombobulated, but I don't know how that happened. I'm not sure what journey I took, of course, because I wasn't looking at my paper, but I did find that interesting. I did find it looked skeletal to me. And as a whole, it's not as dynamic as I wished it was. I think I would need bigger paper for the horses, really. I remember feeling quite constrained by the dimensions that I was working with. The next one. The reference for this next one was a temperamental horse, a temperamental looking horse anyway. And I think this comes across a bit in the drawings. I would like to think that it does in the ears and the eyes and the head. But remember how I said I wanted to focus on the long lines from Dog Week? Well, I thought the neck flowing into the body would make a great long line. You can see where I travelled down here. But it kind of got squashed. The body got a little bit squashed once I thought that I was going to run out of paper. So the neck looks exaggerated from the rest of it. And you can see that I didn't have room for the tail. So, well, I thought I didn't have room for the tail, so it's a little bit squashed in there too. And I crossed over with the contour lines for the back leg, which I was okay with. It made that leg flow nicely. However, the front legs were a little bit stiff. And I'm not sure what the reason for that was. But overall, I think this is a bit average. It feels a bit rushed and constrained by size and the paper. So the next one. This one's quite stretched out, but it's still stuck to the bottom right of the paper in my view. It does look like it's flying, which I absolutely love. The whole front of the horse is awesome. This whole front part here. The head in profile and the legs and the flying mane. But even though the lines look quite fluid and flowing again, I think I felt constrained by the paper. I would have liked to have been able to use my whole arm instead of just my wrist to express those lines and that movement. All right, so now we have this one. Now I chose this one because it felt like a triangular shape overall, and there were lots of internal details inside that shape. And I thought that that would pose a challenge for me. And it did. Overall, I think it came out quite well. There are parts that I really enjoy. I think the head and the twisting movement of the body, I think that does convey movement and energy, which is great. I think we got a little bit more out of this one than the other horses. All right, so we move on to Cat Week, and that was a discovery, wasn't it? We had a couple of surprises with Cat Week, mostly good, but here is that first one. That first one. I remember how surprised I was when I saw this. I went, ooh. It took me a bit to get over my initial reaction, which was, well, this is a little bit creepy. It was actually bordering horrific looking to me really at the time. And I found it disturbing at first until I spent a few moments just to figure it all out. And what made it so unsettling for me was the line of the jaw being disconnected from the head. And I think this might have been because I tried to do, one side and then the other side before putting the contour in for the whole head, because that's missing. And that's why we've got this disconnection, I think. And all of this is connected to a skinny neck. Also just noticed that there might not be a pupil here. I'd have to go searching for that. I'm not sure. That's part of the adventure though, isn't it? But all of this goes into this skinny neck. Yeah, but that sharp jaw really goes to show how effective shape language can be. Those sharp angular shapes can change the entire meaning that an image might give off. And the rest of the body wasn't too bad. While it's not really defined nicely, I think it still looks like a cat that's sitting. The pose is still conveyed. So next, after being slightly horrified by the previous one, I was so relieved to see how cute this one was. I think the last one did influence the path that I was going to take. I wanted to avoid having such sharp edges outside of what I perceived to be the boundary of the head. And so by trying to set the boundary of that head first, including the jaw, it let me then work on the internal contours together. And it seems to have helped it look a little bit more pleasing than the last one. And there is a little bit of a mess of details with the front paws down here, but I don't think that detracts too much from the overall drawing. I think it's really cute. I think it's adorable, really. All right. Now this one I think is even cuter. What a cute kitty. Chosen for the pose because I just love the way that he's sitting. I have drawn this one before in my morning sketches, and I just love drawing this little guy with his little legs sticking up and his little paw pads. And I think I had just as much fun drawing this blind as I did in my morning sketch. And those little toes stand out quite nicely in what I would think isn't a very strong silhouette, as most of the parts would make for internal contours instead, like that triangular composition of that horse. But that leg sticking out really makes the drawing, and the direction of the head leading down to the other legs and the tail going back up through to the little toe beans. It all has quite a nice flow, and it all brings you back into the drawing to discover more of it each time you go around. So yeah, I think this is a really cute one. Now the last one. The original reference was swapped out, so I didn't have two of the same pose, sitting pose. I looked for something more active and dynamic so I could have a nice variety of cat poses, the sitting, the stretching, the cleaning, and now the jumping in the air. And have you noticed it yet? I'll give you a second. I forgot to draw the tail. This sometimes happens when drawing blind because you're not looking down at the paper, and I think this is why in some drawings I went over some parts twice. Being in the moment, I just couldn't remember if I've done it or not. But I think this captured the action of the pose. The back leg is exaggerated, but I think that's probably because I had in mind that this leg was the leg that he was going to land on first, so I guess that makes sense. And this paw came out a little bit small. Just imagine how this would look if it had the details of this paw here. But then that might have made it too strong of a focal point and overtaken the entire thing. It's also interesting to think how your focus on a part can influence how it comes out. Naturally, our focus cycles through, being weak and strong at moments, at any given moment. And I think this does have an effect on how we draw while we're experiencing those cycles. But I still think there's a flow around this drawing through the top paw and the head, down to the little paw, and then the large leg, and then up to the other leg, and then the curve of the back. So there is a focal interest here. I did do some of the internal lines. I believe the cat had a pattern of darker colour on the fur, and I thought just to make it a little bit more visually interesting that I would do that. So that was the cat episode. After that, we have portraits. Now, I remember at the time after doing this one that it looked kind of neat, kind of groovy, and I think it's this line across the forehead. It reminds me of a headband. And then we have the flowy hair as well. So that was enough for it to feel a little bit groovy for me. And it gives it a character of its own, separate from the reference that I used. I also feel that this was a lot more stylized, and perhaps this is because there are less contours than some of the other drawings, less details. And although the fact that I was able to keep the eyeballs within the eyes is pretty impressive. It's kind of nice. And the next one. This next one was the 3/4 view, and the cheek got a little bit blown out. But I remember that there was something about her eyes. It took a while for me to see. It was giving me something that I couldn't quite tell what it was at first. I had to look away and then look back at it to keep getting that first impression. So I would take it away and then look at it, just to try to figure out what she was trying to say to me. It was just such a fleeting feeling at first, but I do remember thinking that after a while it felt like she was looking straight at me and with a little bit of attitude, like she was trying to tell me something. Is she looking at you right now? Trying to tell you something. But I think her expression in this blind drawing is more reflective of the viewer, and it's subtle, and she is definitely trying to say something. But I find that amazing to come across in a blind drawing. Next, we have another 3/4 portrait. In hindsight, I probably could have picked more variety of head poses like I did with the others, but you know, that's okay. I didn't think of it at the time. But I remember thinking this one looked very sad. The downward angle of the eyes, going down like this, in relation to a slightly pouty mouth, just gave it a sad impression at first. But looking at it now, I don't think it looks as sad as I first thought it did. However, there is still an element of expression there. Perhaps it's sadness, or if only the eyes weren't staring straight at me, it could be more contemplative. But I'm not sure yet. I would have to look at this for a little bit longer. But I do notice how this is more visually interesting than that first one. And I think that's because there's more details to discover. And there's also more areas to rest your eyes on while you go out and discover those details. And the hair is awesome. I love the hair on this one. I love the shape of the curly locks. All right, the last one. I thought I would add extra difficulty, and that it did. I really enjoyed traveling around this photo reference and drawing all the bits and pieces. But when I looked at my drawing at the time, my first impression wasn't that good, to be honest. I didn't really like it. It took me a few minutes to start deciphering the picture. And once I found those places that I could put together in my head, I actually really enjoyed them. I actually really enjoyed this the most. Actually, this became my favorite out of all of them. I did lift my pen off the paper near the end because I knew that I had forgotten to draw some extra elements like the nose ring. It's up here. And the earring. And the pendant as well. I used my best guess to where to put these. They aren't in the right places, but I think they're close enough to be visually connected to those parts that they belong to. I remember I felt this looked quite surreal to me. And I do like surreal drawings. I like to have something to figure out in a drawing. Just like movies. I don't like it when everything is set up in the first 5 or 10 minutes and there's nothing left to discover. Let me figure it out. Don't just dump all the info on me at the start. Let me take time and figure it out and enjoy the journey. And I do like that in my art as well. And this part here has enough recognizable detail that it provides me a place to rest my focus while I explore the rest of the image. And then come back to rest again. And I think because when I was looking at my reference when I did this, and I was doing this in parts, you can see that obviously this part of the face I did together and this part was separate, which is interesting. All right, we come to the double blind week. What an exercise. Oh my goodness. This was a bonus episode where I did blind drawings without a reference. And I found this an incredible, absolutely incredible exercise, and it really blew me away in the moment. It challenged me in so many ways and taught me quite a bit about how my mind works to draw creatively, at least, and how much of my drawing is on autopilot. I highly recommend you try this out. Seriously. I did have trouble picturing the things to draw because I have no references, And this had to be made entirely from memory and imagination. And now I couldn't hold these pictures in my head for very long, so I wrote them down. And these are the prompts to help me bring that image back up in my mind again. Because I found that I couldn't hold the entire image for more than a split second, and then it was gone. It just went poof, it's gone. I just floated around. But it wasn't anything that I could pull back into focus. It took effort to keep bringing it back into focus for the whole thing. And what happened for me was, as I was drawing, I could only focus on one element at a time for only a few seconds. So it'll be just the eye, the ears, the feet, the tail. It felt like I was looking through a scope where you could only focus on that one small area. And the rest was out of focus or floating just nebulously in my head. And I could only draw on and bring in that one section at a time. And it was just a fascinating experience. And I think because I'm not used to doing it, it showed me I draw a lot on autopilot, leaning really heavily on references to draw from, as I suspect a lot of people do, because this is how you learn to draw. But this is the element that's missing. I think this exercise could be a great way to learn drawing from the imagination or from memory. It really felt intense at the time. It was like intense exercising of that part of my brain. It also made it feel like that was something that could actually be trained, which was fascinating. But here we basically have Haru. I've even written it down. It's basically Haru. It took a while to figure out what to draw at first. Like I said, it's hard to keep a picture in mind. But I have a lot of memories of looking at dogs and Haru, and Haru kept coming to mind. So I wrote down something to prompt that image, to remind myself of the image so I could keep it there to draw from. And these prompts are just like training wheels. I thought of them as training wheels, I guess, because I've never done this before. So I needed those training wheels. I closed my eyes, I put pen to paper, and I basically drew Haru. And this is my favorite. This is my favorite. I fell in love with it straight away, obviously. I love the little paws, the way she's sitting. You know how dogs sometimes sit just a little bit on one hip and it's like you can see their belly. It's just adorable. And the one ear up and the one ear flopped over. The tongue and the jaw is a little bit disconnected. It's supposed to be her little tongue hanging out, but I still love it. I love it. The little bits of fur and her curly tail. Yeah, definitely my favorite. Next, we have the cat. So here for this one, I had in mind a kitten doing that sideways walk, you know, when they're trying to make themselves look really big and fierce and all fluffed up and their tail is all big, and, you know, when the kittens are playing or when they see their reflection in the mirror and they just do that crab walk on the side. It's just absolutely adorable. It doesn't really look like a kitten, but it's definitely a cat. And I really enjoyed drawing this. I remember it felt really childlike. It felt like I was tapping into my inner child, drawing away happily from imagination. And it was a really, really nice feeling to get back into that innocence, really. But yeah, it's a funny drawing. This is a funny one. We've got the fuzzy tail. We've got the stance. And I think if the head was bigger, it probably would have been a little bit more kitten-like, but or the eyes at least. But yeah, a lot of them remind me of childlike drawing. They're just so adorable to me. All right, so we've got the horse. This horse was a bit for me. I wrote down my prompt, 3/4 rearing, head turned. And yeah, I did that. I did have a vision in mind for this, but it was so hard to keep it together. And I think that it shows in the result. It is exactly what I wrote down, but I felt constrained, like the other horses as well, by the size of the paper. I would have liked to think that I have a good visual library when it comes to horses, but I just couldn't keep it together enough while drawing this. It suffers from that scope or tunnel vision on the individual parts. You can see that I've done it with individual parts. It did feel nice drawing the hair though, I will admit that. But it's just too squashed overall. It's a little bit too peanut shape. It looks like a peanut. I was surprised that I got the legs facing the viewer, because in mind I had a horse that was kind of twisting as it was rearing up and with its head in the opposite direction. So I did get that, but you know, that's all there. It's just squashed in a peanut shape. So then we go to the portrait. So this one was a 3/4 low angle, looking down at the viewer. I didn't quite get that, so I did miss the brief a little bit. Individually, I think I got them quite close, but this one just feels a little weird to me. It's not what I pictured in my head. The elements are there, except for the looking down at the viewer part, And if you look at those parts individually, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the hair, they're all there. And they're pretty close to what I had in mind to draw, but when it's all together, it's just not there, and it's just a little bit strange, which is fascinating. All right, last one. Coming to our last one, the figure. This is another strange drawing, and I'll tell you why in a second. First, I'll tell you about the the drawing. I think I was able to hold this one a little better in my mind at first. I felt a little bit more confident that I could hold this picture in my mind a little bit longer, I think, from doing the exercises previously. But when I started drawing, it did start to fall apart, literally. After that initial picture that I could hold in my head, and after it dissolved, it was just really, really difficult for me just to keep going. I did refer to my prompt, my training wheels, remember, a couple of times, because I would just forget what I was doing, what part that I was on. And I think that does stand out. It does show. It was just so difficult. The overall image that I initially pictured that I thought I had a hold on just kept flying in and out. But I think that would come with training, and I think that this exercise would help with that. Again, I did feel constrained by this paper. You can see that I've squashed the hair up here because I thought I was at the top. But I drew the head, then I drew the arm, then I drew the leg, then the other leg, and then the other half of the body and the boobs, and then the other hand. And it looks just as disconnected as that. I guess this really looks like an accurate map of how I treated the initial image in my mind and how I focused on those parts at any particular time, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. And it feels quite personal if I think about it that way. Most people like to keep their internal workings private in their heads, but this is all on paper for everyone to see. It does make me feel a little bit vulnerable. I feel like anyone looking at this is looking into the way that my mind works. So that was a strange, strange feeling. So while we put these out, some of these out, let's get some of these dog ones. Yeah. So I'm just going to go over the main points of this exercise. I believe the main benefits to blind drawing are the ones that everyone says. Yes, definitely hand-eye coordination, but also eye-to-hand coordination. It trains our hand to follow our eye, but I think it also trains our eye to see and choose what messages to send to the hand to draw. And that also leads into those observational skills. And yes, you do take the time to see things properly by looking at each edge, each contour, and making those decisions on the journey that you're going to take around your reference and how to follow, and just make that choice of how to use that information. So that's definitely comes into the observational skills. I do think it helps you to relax, take the pressure off to draw and draw loosely. It's a way to relinquish control, draw freely and experiment, definitely. It helps overcome some of the self-criticism that creeps into our art sometimes and just reset those expectations, because once again, you are relinquishing control of the outcome. So those are all the main points that I think people think of when you think of blind drawing. Some of the lesser known benefits to blind drawing, I think, are the way drawing blind bypasses the brain's visual shorthand and preconceived ideas of what something should look like, all while still improving your visual memory, because you are drawing from observation only and not substituting that observation with clip art from the brain. We all love to rely on that clip art from the brain. But yeah, bypassing that and just sending the signal directly from the eye to the hand, from the hand to the eye, making those choices is definitely one of the benefits to doing these exercises. I think it creates a stronger connection to your subject as well, almost getting really personal with it. That can make the drawing a journey, a story, a time to slow down and take in what you are drawing and get to know it and become more attuned to the subject that you're drawing. Another lesser known benefit, I think it opens you up to discovery and creativity. Definitely. It will push you in directions to explore that you just wouldn't do otherwise. And I believe that's important to fostering new ideas and keeping yourself open, I guess, to use a cliche, that foster a growth mindset. I think blind drawings do help with that. And all of this helps to create a really strong foundation to the physical act of drawing and the technical skills involved, but also a better foundation for developing that relationship with your art and also art in general. The opening of the mind and the ideas and creativity flows into your outer world as well in unexpected ways. We really have no idea what kind of flow-on effects this view would have in the future. It could be subtle, or it could smack you in the face next time you go to the gallery or just look at art in general. Now to the parts that I really enjoyed with blind drawing. Each drawing is unique and reflects the ebb and flow of focus at any given part or section of the drawing. Our hand and that influence creates something different every time. It's amazing. I really love the element of surprise and discovery. Oh my gosh, I thoroughly enjoyed getting to explore each one, as unique as they are, even if some were more exciting to view than others. And I also enjoyed the meditative way it felt. I felt this exercise was calming, and it helped me to reduce stress and tap into a different mindset, almost childlike wonder, and that felt like a really nice place to be for a while, especially while drawing. Some thoughts that I took note of while I was doing this journey were that each drawing is like a gift that I gave to myself to unwrap and discover what it is. It really did feel like I was giving myself a present. And sometimes I can get fairly close to it being accurate when I disengage my thinking brain, the part of my brain that thinks it knows what to draw. Remember that clip art for the brain? And the results can be really interpretive and reflective, definitely expressive. The reflective part was a surprise to me because I think a lot of these blind drawings, the impression that it gives off can be reflective of the person that's looking at them. I did find that with a lot of them. And after you do blind drawings, it's really well worthwhile to sit with it for a bit. Just slowly take it in and let it speak to you, because most of them will, if you give them enough time and a chance and that consideration. I also seem to like filling in the blanks, putting together the abstract. My brain really enjoys having something to do, I guess. It's just interesting, and to me can be quite captivating. I found each drawing had its own personality, its own character, and sometimes went as far as having something to say. I just had to observe it and let it come to me. And I found the lines and contours that I draw blindly led me onto many visual adventures with many unexpected and sometimes really wild twists and turns. Anyway, finally, the biggest surprise of all was trying those blind drawings with no reference. I think it might be one of those lessons that almost feel like cheating. Like I found the shortcut or hack to training that part of my brain. Seriously, go try it for yourself. It might just be the secret sauce. So that's the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed the journey, and I truly hope you tried this out for yourself. I'm going to incorporate what I've learned and try to come back to blind drawings a little more regularly than what I'm used to, especially the double blind one. But these are going to be personal drawings for me, just for me. So if you liked this series and if you gave it a try, leave a comment and tell me what you thought of it. If you don't want to leave a comment, consider subscribing instead if you haven't. I like to think that I've introduced a different way to see art or some new discovery for each new subscriber that I see. I will leave you with that thought, and I will spend some time thinking of a new series for us to try out soon. So keep drawing, everyone, and keep discovering.